You're up, Commissioner.
All right, we are back in session, but we have to come out of BOE because we're still in BOE.
Oh, we didn't go out.
And we need to close BOE officially now.
We need to officially close BOE.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the 2022 Board of Equalization.
We have a motion. All in favor say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, I move that we exit the Board of Equalization and reconvene as Board of County Commissioners.
We have a motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
That was a long recess.
It was, as soon as everybody left, oh, we didn't officially come out of BOE. Now we have. All right, now we're talking about funds, ARPA.
Number one, I propose
You
that we-
requested.
Well, number one, we need to start spending money.
Yep.
And Chrissy's finished her report, so she's willing to entertain that discussion now. And so, item number one on the list in my mind was the sewer line, which was 1.5. Is that
Yes,
about where
and-
we're at with that?
I just reviewed previous engineer's notes, and I do come up with just over 1.4, so I'm glad we were talking 1.5. And that was the last estimates that I got.
Okay. Item number two that I know that we've been talking about that came up a week or so ago in budget was a $2 million investment in the wellness center for concerts and that nature. So
Yeah.
on the record, are we good with that?
If I'd say number two though for me is the forensic.
Oh, yeah, okay,
mean,
that's fine.
These aren't in order of precedence. These are
Okay.
just
No,
projects.
Okay, you're just
I was just checking through my memory with
Okay.
most
No,
recent
no, came up
discussion
most recently.
backwards.
As long as we're not kind of putting them in an order, that's
No,
fine.
no.
But the forensic, we're kind of committed. And that's
Right. Wellness center,
And the forensic is $1 million?
two.
Two.
Up to two.
yeah, so
Up to two, not, so it could be less, could be more, it depends on.
So item number three, in no particular order, is the forensic pathology program.
And, you
And
know,
that
the,
is up to two, so I'll just say two for,
the savings on all those detectives not having to drive, you know, the city could gladly help contribute to that then too, because there's not gonna be that burden and fuel usage and vehicle usage on those vehicles. So there will be substantial savings to the cities of Hotel and Chubbuck. I'm just stating that.
then number four, again, no particular order. We had talked about a $1.5 million, up to a $1.5 million investment in the EOC Center, but based on our discussion last week and killing the investment in ISU's facility, we need to revisit that
Yeah, we
and see
can't-
if we want to look at doing our own building and taking care of two or three different things.
I think we should look at something like that, because the whole thing is that if the asbestos and lead mitigation on that building could be several $100,000. And looking at some of the stuff that we've seen across the state,
Wellness Center.
you could go in and you could build you
Excuse me.
some of the pieces of ground we have available up by the wellness complex. You could build a multi-use facility where you could house that office, the facilities offices, and you could still have a fairly large multi-use area in a building, and it would probably be in that 1.5 to 2. Me and Dan and I had looked at some of those steel buildings, and you just finish out some office space in one of them. And we looked at some of the costs, and you could build a 100 by 200, 150 by 300 foot building where you could have a big, there's an area where you could still have some stuff that would be used year round then, just not for events and training and EOC, but you could have all that stuff in there.
So what dollar amount you want
That's what I was just in my head.
I just put 2 right now just for a placeholder.
what
Well,
I'm-
I would say, do we need to put that much? Can we go one?
You might. We haven't even done an RFI, and I would request doing an
Split the
RFI.
difference. I put 1.5
Yeah,
on my
1.5.
paper.
I was just doing 2 to make it whole.
What's the square footage? Because we're going that safe, if it's similar-ish to that safe team?
No, it won't. It won't be the same
One
fit
big
finish.
open space.
It'll be a
for
lot
of
different.
it.
Yeah. So
Cheaper?
yes, much
Yeah.
cheaper.
Okay.
So
we're
what?
doing roughly 4,400 square feet for 1.2.
Yeah, and that's a high level finish compared to this. This is a instead of 150 a foot, you'd probably be down to $50 to $75 a foot. And it's if you do a steel span structure, like I said, the main thing for that one is we'd start an RFI or RFP and just put it out and say, hey, give us some proposals for this and how much is it going to cost. And that would be thing to figure that out. But I was just putting two, just to be
Okay.
whole numbers.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that we've kind of kicked around a little bit, not a ton, but with our discussion on the ambulance district and McCammon and their fire station, I would throw out, and we've talked about potentially putting $1 million into the fire station in McCammon so that we can have a spot for the ambulance
Well, and I think that's,
district to reside.
and I think that's the discussion is what we have, because what was their total bond for?
They are short $1 million after their bond.
So what was their total bond for then?
2.5, I think.
2.5, so you're building a third of their facility?
So is that gonna give, so originally if their bond was for this, will that million add what we need?
No, their original bond was for what we need. Their bond just came up short because of the cost increase.
They designed what we need.
That's what I was
Did
getting
it-
at. The
Yeah,
design
sorry,
is that.
I answered that
Okay.
incorrectly.
Okay.
They designed what we're
Well,
talking.
and I think that's and I think too on that, Jeff, is the discussion of when they go into construction phase, because you're gonna see materials are gonna dip here a little bit. So maybe we just, again, up to,
Yeah,
and tell them, hey, if we don't have to have it, let's not, I mean, you're doing it for the ambulance side.
There's a little bit of argument going on between the council members down there too. Seeing the full picture of the vision, and some saying, why do we even need to change? So there's a challenge a little bit there, but they need some help to move forward, and I think it'd be a great deal to have an ambulance
Yeah.
mid-county.
well, again, going back to my discussions with the ambulance district and response times for the ambulance.
That's where it's needed.
It's a 20-minute response time down south versus 3 to 8 minutes anywhere here in the metropolitan area. And where were we the other day when they were talking about if the sheriff's deputies hadn't have been in Lava, they would have lost somebody because the sheriff's deputies were able to respond before the
Yeah.
ambulance, the volunteer ambulance got there.
And is there an ambulance, not an ambulance in Live anymore?
There is, but they've got issues staffing it.
Yeah.
There's a conversation.
It goes
gonna happen.
offline all the time.
Conversation gonna happen on Thursday with them about, there's a rodeo down there,
Oh,
and they was wanting an ambulance
okay,
down that way, which I think they're required in the rodeo.
should be.
It's a bulls only event. So,
Yeah. So if my math is correct, that puts us at about 8 million. Is that- I turn to Christie because
Yeah.
your math is better than mine.
That's why I used whole numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, project number 6 is theoretically supposed to come before us next week and talk about the potential ad for that.
So there's a potential for a development project that may or may not take place, but if they come ask, we'll see what we can do with it.
We did get the other 8.5 million just either late last week or early this week.
Okay, so we're fully,
So we have all the funds.
Okay.
We'll just have to figure out where the projects fit within the categories. I think in an ideal world, we use the 8.5 first, because the 10 million can be for general operations. So if we can earmark the 8.5 for projects, then the stricter money is spent
And
as
the-
opposed to,
the
The
sewer line
unrestricted
could
is
fit
easier.
that 8.5, couldn't
Yeah.
it? The second 8.5, the one that has more restrictions on it.
well, we've got.
8.5
so
may
of our
have
money,
17
we
total.
opted for 10 million to be revenue
Correct.
replacement money. So that can be used for general county operations. And then the 8.5 is what we have to use for, and that's just easy math, but the 8.5 is what has to be earmarked for these projects.
Specific projects.
Yeah.
So-
Right, that's what I was saying, the
Yeah.
sewer line, that fits into
Definitely
that more
fits.
restrictive
Yes.
8.5.
Yep, and I think possibly the forensic pathologist, but
Yep. Public health.
we can double check that.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's where a lot of them are actually using it for lab science, additional staffing, anything for that public health thing, because that also will increase cooler space, because we don't have any. We didn't have a morgue during the event. The other one too is if we do that building up with the EOC, emergency disaster response, there's some stuff in there for infrastructure purposes for things like that. We might be able to count some of it to it. That's been something that some of the other areas are doing, is those, what are they, the FEMA. It's a FEMA FEMA space is what they call it. That's available to use as for that.
So,
That's where we're putting our emergency response.
Yes,
So-
and that's why I say we could count some of that.
so depending on how much money we stick into our development project, that leaves us anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 million to put
Depends on what's
elsewhere.
there, Yeah. Yep. So
If my math is correct.
Can I
Yep.
clarify on the EOC? Did you guys opt to leave it at 1.5 then, or move it to 2?
I don't know what we did.
EOC was supposed to be
1.5.
1.5. One of the questions that Mr. Cheatham asked me the other day, I don't know if that's why he's here or not, but he's watching the big boys in action, he said, I think. He was curious as to if we were still interested in the sewer project from Ingham to Pocatello.
I think that's something we're always interested in. That's going to be probably a bigger funding window with IDEQ. That grant, did they receive that grant back for study? Because they adjusted some stuff and they were going forward to study. That's something the legislature is going to have to appropriate this next year, is in those funds, because they did, what, $400 million this year. There's going to be another, they're looking at over 800 million in excess this next year. So, I mean, that's where those DEQ type project dollars, that's where we have to apply for it. The way that they did it this year, we didn't have a shovel-ready project, so all those monies went to all these, and so that's where I think that project, we need to start pushing that as a shovel-ready project, is we start studying it and we start getting to it, because when those kind of monies become available, Ada County and all these other counties, they have all their projects ready to go in the first of line.
If you begin a study, how long will that take? Because we have to have all this ARPA gone by 2025?
It depends what the,
It's gotta be obligated by 20, honestly, I've not looked at this in
yeah,
so
a little
long.
bit. I thought it was
It's
2024
gotta be
obligated. gone by
obligated and
20.
then expended later.
Yeah.
Oh, by 26? Okay.
It's like an obligation at 24 and then gone by 26.
Oh, here
December
we
of
go, yeah.
24.
Money spent by 12/31 of 26.
Okay.
That's awesome.
So the big
So-
question is what the study point is, because that's where Ingham had, they were working on that grant when they thought they'd get the grant to do all the engineering work and study that.
Right.
And if they got that, then what we do is then you go into substantial design. If that's actually what comes out of where everybody wants to proceed, because then what we need to do is have substantial design and put that all together, and then you'd stand ready for a.
So do you think the legislature would fund all of that, or it would require us to chip in our?
There would probably be some
Whatever.
monies that would have to be available somewhere in that. They usually will do like matching type stuff in those grants.
So if we did a sewer district, the sewer district.
Well, the
could-
sewer district,
could fund
so this
some
is
of
the
that?
problem, is the sewer district would have to be formed by the citizens. The county and the cities can't go independently. You know, we can't form a taxing entity. We can contribute to that taxing entity if those are the resources that are voted on by the people. So you'd have to have a group that would be willing to do that. I think you might. I need to research something,
Well-
because I think there might be, but that's the whole discussion point then.
As we talk about this, so this has a lot of question marks, a lot of hurdles in the way to make this one happen.
Yes, but that is the one that, to tell you the truth, that if we can address that question in the north end of Bannock County, that's really the question that needs to be addressed. Is we have this huge problem, or the fastest growing zip code in Bannock County is not in Pocatello or Chubbuck, it's in the Gap. And so through geographic area, they do not have the ability for sewer stuff. And that's why I say DEQ, you could probably get a good majority of the project paid for. Because it's rural, it's joint systems, they like doing that, whether it's through a sewer district or not. Having joint districts like that, or joint entities, and you'd have to work out MOUs, and I mean there would be a whole bunch of different stuff. But those are the projects they like to fund, not just one entity that's going to benefit the most from.
So another thing that I've thought about ever since we've talked about the safe teen deal over here is either on that side or over here, more of an administrative offices. Not know how many office you ended up with in this safe teen.
There's only like 15, 10 offices, something like that.
But I think we gotta talk about the building across the street and the old jail. Neither one of them are functionally
They're not
in
functioning
the
at
best shape. And if we have $2 or $3 million and we're doing this other one for $1 million, I'm just saying that's something that we could finance as a county, but it's something that is a necessity and we ought to have it on our radar somewhere.
Well, I think that's the whole thing is if there's funds left, that's where we start having that discussion is the study monies or matching monies for either the sewer line or for doing some kind of administrative type building. I think that's,
Which way would you want to go?
Honestly, environmentally, that makes a lot of sense. A function as a county and as we grow, we have to do something here. So I'd say we investigate in both and see how we get the most bang for our buck.
right, I really think too is if we need to talk to Mayor Schaefer and see where that study went and if they actually got that funded, because they thought they would get that funded. And if that got funded, and they can go back and look at that and say, hey, yes, this really does make financial sense. This is to do this, 'cause that was part of that study, is this a viable option? I mean, they could come back on that option and say, hey, this is gonna be a $200 million project.
Let's do this, and let's take a step back to our development. What's the maximum that we're willing to invest in that, because then that will impact
I think the big thing
the
is
sewer/building.
I think we need to have that, what that actual request for that project would actually be, because it's been all over the place.
Right, but I would like to kind of know where we're at before we get into that, again, because it drives
Yeah.
this
the
other discussion.
I think that without having the full picture there of what's gonna come, of what they're doing, that was the whole point of what a lot of that development side up there, to build that out. I don't know, I've always been in the 5 to 8 range, somewhere in there, but I don't know what they're gonna do and what all that encompasses.
But I believe that we would receive more help, federal and stuff there, than we would by investing money within the county itself. So I agree, it's something that we set a dollar amount that we'd be willing to participate in, but I think that we, like you said, I think we need to talk to Max and see
'Cause
where they're
that's-
at right now and if the city of Income doesn't want to participate at all,
Then
then
there's-
it's
a moot
a
discussion.
dead deal.
Well,
And
if the city of Pocatello doesn't wanna participate, it's a moot discussion, because we don't own the line. And that's the whole thing, is we wanna be that facilitation and being the facilitating agent to do that.
That's why I'm saying that one has so many question marks.
It has a whole ton of stuff. And like I said, the study, if Income does that study, it might actually come back and say, hey, you had to actually build this line, might be this, but you might have other costs that were not factored into the initial construction cost. We could come back and that'd be a big dollar amount.
finishing the loop on around by the country club and stuff too.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that's where
there's,
the conversation comes with the city.
yeah, where are they going with their sewer lines and what's their future? Because it's also gonna drive the question then of how fast does the next sewer treatment facility expansion have to occur as well?
Well, our conversation with Northgate today, I mean, yeah, they've stuck some water lines and sewer lines in there, but they're not adequate for the expansion or growth. It's a
Right.
single user line.
No.
Can we ask Councilman Cheatham a question while he's here?
Sure.
Councilman Cheatham, would you come on up?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
Curious.
Do you have any insight into sewer line discussion as you've heard us talk, like the Johnny Creek area or up in the Northgate area?
I know that we're currently involved in trying to do something on South Fifth. We've got what we think, but haven't proven and don't know for sure. We've got a bunch of leaks
Yeah.
on South Fifth. A number of those mobile home parks are very old, and the lines in those are privately owned. They're not part of the city's system. And we think that's where our nitrate problem came on well number 2 in Ross Park.
Yeah.
But we can't trace it. 5 years ago it would have been easy, because there is a drug that's administered to animals that wasn't at that time administered to humans, and you can track that drug very easily in analysis of water. Well, now people are taking it since COVID, and that eliminates the possibility of doing that. The city has ordered our sanitation department to look into that. I just don't know whether that South Fifth connector is capable of the volumes that you're talking about with substantial improvement. And I don't know how much volume you're talking about. I talked to Max Schaefer, probably it was March or April. He told me they had a completed study for $50,000 on that system. But I don't know how comprehensive that study was and exactly what.
I think that was their initial, and now they're going back with that study and asking for additional grant funding. I thought they were asking for like $250,000 to actually have substantial design, to actually go in and break it out then, because they studied the construction costs from Income to Pocatello. They didn't actually look at all of Pocatello's needs of what you'd have to have there. And they didn't look at either completing the sewer loop going around Portneuf Road from the landfill towards the country club as well. Because there's some questions there, and that was what that study was supposed to be. Because if we could figure out how to do this, I mean, this is a game changer for that whole valley, all the way up the valley. But it could be 10 or 15 million, or it could be 100 million. I mean, we just don't know right now, and that's where I say, if the city's willing to look at that, we do need to look at that South Fifth. That is something that we've been talking about. There's some partials that may or may not have been caused by county, and then there may or may not be some private owners.
We can neither confirm nor deny.
Yes,
Well,
and there might be some
zigzag
yeah.
pattern of whether it's city or county down Fifth Street really makes this issue complicated. You drive one block and you're in the county, and the next block you're in the city, and the next block you're back in the county, and it really makes this issue complicated.
And there's some of these trailer parks that it's a private line, and the DEQ threatens to fine us $250,000 all the time. Well, if this is a clear example of it, go fine them and make them fix it. And if they don't want to do that, then sorry, but that's what's there. Why is the taxpayer paying for it for a private entity making money? But those are the questions. So I think that I would be wholeheartedly support putting that line out there. Everybody thinks I'm insane for that, but
We need a lot more information.
we do, and that was the whole point of that discussion with the sewer or with DEQ.
And when I talked to Max, he said that the initial study said they would only need 2 lift stations
Mm-hmm.
to get from Income to Pocatello. And I'm finding that hard to believe, driving that terrain and looking at it. I think they're short. And the other issue becomes who maintains all that once it's built.
Yeah.
Is it Pocatello's responsibility? Does it belong to the city of Income up to a certain point? Does it become a sewer district? Exactly. How is all that maintained?
Well, what does the city of Chubbuck do right now?
That it's theirs. Till they deliver it to our entry point, it's theirs. Whether it's south of I-86 or north of I-86, the rates that we charge for delivery, for taking delivery of that is different, because there's another lift station involved.
Yeah.
So, based on what we're talking about, do you gentlemen feel pretty comfortable with those first 5 projects that we
Yeah.
identified, not in any particular order,
Yeah.
but totaling about $8 million?
Yeah. And then, like I said, the question on that development project that I've been working on, it's really going to be what they come at us with next
Right.
week, because it's changed 18 different ways.
Well, that discussion then influences the discussion
Yes.
we're just having here about the sewer line and something else, so,
Yeah.
okay.
There was one other project that was brought up, Adam brought up, the
Oh.
microwave project.
Yes.
It was gonna be about $800,000-900,000-ish.
That-
And
That's something if we could
that's kind of vital.
if we can get that one in to fit, that one needs to get in there, because that's one of those. Every 20 years we got to update those microwaves.
Well, I would say that becomes project number 6,
Yeah.
and then our development and sewer project are made up of what's left after
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Commissioner Moser, are you comfortable with that?
I am. Like I said, I've been preaching since April that we need to start spending some money. And I know that the reporting is part of it, but it's time to move. I don't know what's gonna happen in January. I want to have things rolling forward enough that we don't have hiccups
Yep.
if other people are sitting in seats.
And we got 17 million, sorry. I was adding 8.5, and 8.5, and somehow throw an extra 1.5 million in there.
That's okay.
I was like 17 million.
Gonna have to look at our books on Monday.
All those numbers are getting crossed in there right now.
A little bit.
It's number season, man. Just leave it alone.
I
Well,
could have waited to go off the record to say that, but.
I'm comfortable with this, that at least we have a direction so that we can start talking to people about what we want to do. I know McCammon, they will appreciate that so they can go further with their financing and begin to start looking at that. Which
The good thing out there is they've waited long enough that construction prices are starting to come down now. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
you know, they might not be a full million over. They might be a half over, or, you know, or whatever.
And there's potentially some federal money from them that they're waiting to find out if they're
Yes.
going to get approved for that or not. So if we say up to,
Yeah.
then whatever they're short with their federal money
Yeah.
and construction costs coming down, then we can.
Well, and that's the whole thing with a lot of these things. Even like Adam on his microwave tower, there's some things that he needed to get a little bit tighter on. So there's some stuff that there might be a little bit more. We do an RFP for a steel building, you know, up there, and what we're doing. And like I said, we're not doing. I mean, you're basically having a big giant
I just
steel
want to
garage.
clarify though, that we're not giving this money to McCammon. We're investing in the ambulance
South. This is
system
the ambulance.
of Bannock County in the
Correct.
McCammon area.
Yes,
I
because-
don't want other cities to come and say, well, you're giving McCammon $1 million.
No.
We're really not.
This helps us.
This
take
is
care of Chubby
so all
County as well.
all the cities in the south can have faster response time.
And then we can have an MOU so they don't
Yep.
charge us for it.
That is
Yes.
correct.
Well, and this is, you know, and it's not just
Or for lead paint.
it's not just ambulance response time. The other thing too is when we start talking about like the sheriff's shooting incident that happened out there in McCammon last year. If you would have had personnel injured, or even just, and I look at personnel, this is a discussion I have with the sheriff's office, you're still 20 minutes for an ambulance coming out of Pocatello. This is not just for ambulance, this is for all of our personnel, this is for everything else that needs to happen.
They're talking about having an officer or two there for the sheriff's.
Correct.
Yes.
Using it as a sheriff's substation as well.
So, cool. I mean, so that's just clarification.
No, and I appreciate that because that is what it's for. It's for the South County Emergency Services. It's not just
For
for
the-
McCammon.
I'm good. I say it's time to go forth and gather more information.
So I did want to just some additional direction if we need to have other meetings. Scott and I had talked briefly about lights and things that were involved in his $2 million. Are we okay to start looking at whether we want to do a request for information or have a proposal? Are we okay to start creating some of those documents?
Yes.
To bring before the board?
Can we answer that question? Because this wasn't marked for action.
Well, it's part of the
Discussion.
ARPA expense of what that 2 million is what we were talking about, because when we started talking about that, there's some of the back end stage stuff, the lights, some of the sound stuff that we were
The sound.
talking about in that 2 million. That's not just for seed money for there's also some equipment things there that we were
Correct.
talking about. And the only way we're gonna start being able to get prices for is RFIs, start understanding costs, or setting an RFP in place. That's the same thing like the steel building we're talking about. We've got to start gathering that information now to decide, is this really what we're, it might have sounded like a
Well-
great idea until we find out it costs 5 times more than what we were.
I have no problem with us going forward, looking at these projects. But they'll still come before us, before we
Yes.
put anything out there to anybody, before we do anything, and so on.
This $2 million, and we really haven't even discussed budget, or we've just said it's going to be $2 million per project. So do we want to wait and see what we're going to need for other items before, so that you can prioritize what?
Well, and I think that's,
Well, and I think that's, you mean in these others?
No,
Or
the Event Center Wellness.
that we-
That
the
2 million?
Fund that we're going to set up, yeah.
We're gonna set up the
Because
two.
we don't know what we're going to need for
well, and
the
that's,
events.
But I think that's all the projects.
That's
that
what we're
talking
at.
It's all
about.
in the 2 million, but
but that's
But it's
what
all
we're-
the projects they can start working on that, building that.
Get the information.
Within-
Okay.
So, all we're doing is talking about information right now.
Okay.
What we
And then
wanted-
it'll
I
still
thought we were
come,
talking action, moving to do RFPs
well,
and that kind of stuff.
it won't until it comes before us, and then we ask them
And
questions.
starting to build an RFI, it's just a request for information from those companies, so we can start building budgetary understanding, so we have a tighter
I don't
idea
even
on it.
understand what we want.
Yeah, we don't even know, I mean, they said you need to buy lights. Well, what does lights mean?
Well, and
Is that me up there with a spotlight or, a
well,
fluorescent
and
bulb?
that's where I was coming from, is we don't even know what,
I think.
we haven't talked
I
bigger
think
picture
your
of-
question will be answered when Scott brings us a business proposal, which we are not too far away from.
Okay.
I think we've got some pretty
Yes.
solid
Okay.
numbers to put that together.
that's
But there's things in these projects that we talked about that we need to start RFIing.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to start probably putting RFPs together for some of it, and just ask, hey, what is the total cost
I
of
just didn't
this?
know we were at the point that we knew what we needed yet.
Yeah, no, we're
pretty close.
we're getting there, but, yeah.
We're at a 75% base solution.
We're not quite to the 95, but we're getting there.
And as far as the EOC, because then, do we know what the design, what design we want? Am I looking for an architect that can propose potential designs to the board
For which one?
for the EOC?
Why don't we talk to Hal and?
Yeah, we're gonna need
get
some,
direction?
well, first of all, we're gonna need some information on general costing of building materials and equipment. So there's some things that way, let's talk, and like I say, we get with Hal, we get with some, Dan Kendall, he's already done some research into this. There's some stuff, do we need further so that's where an RFI would go out to, like, Morton could receive an RFI. They could respond to that, all of those, but we have to put those RFIs out before we just have Morton come in and say, hey, I wanna do this for you. We wanna put an RFI out, hey, give us an understanding of how much a general per square foot for a project like this, what are we kind of ballpark looking at?
But on that one, you want an additional meeting with internal staff
Yeah,
to know what that looks
yeah.
like?
Yes.
Yeah, because we'll need to put out what the requirements would be.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you for your time.
I move to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.